Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and that's the Governance and Operations Committee meeting of Monday, September 23rd, 2024. The first item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda, and the recommendation is that the agenda for the Governance and Operations Committee meeting be adopted as presented. Councillor Hansen and Councillor Wilson, all those in favor? Carried unanimously, thank you. General Governance and Finance, the Trail Smoke Eaters Hockey Club, the facilities user agreement, and I will pass this on to Ms. Butler for any comments or.
Thank you, through the chair. It took quite some time to negotiate this lease, but I think that in recognition of the $1 million USD donation from the Murphy Family Foundation, that it reflects a fair and equitable agreement between the two parties. I think that it speaks to the fairness of what's happening in that hockey league around British Columbia and what other teams are paying. And I also think we are extremely lucky that we do have the Murphy Family Foundation to continually support the community when it comes to our Trail Memorial Center. So if there's any questions about
the agreement? No?
I just, thank you. I had earlier wanted to just understand where it was at financially based on what we were currently being, the user amount from the Trail Smoke Eaters Hockey Club and what that looked like as a donation and repayment schedule and what that difference was. So thank you so much for providing that information earlier.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, Councillor Cashel, go ahead.
I'm not going to oppose it, just relax. No, I just want to say thank you to Ms. Butler for taking the lead on this. It was months of work and really appreciate the effort. And Mr. McClure, of course, was involved and other staff, but thank you for the time and energy and effort you put into this to make this work. I much appreciate it on behalf of the constituents as well.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cashel. I agree. It's such a win-win for our community. You know, the arena gets the upgrades, and what's really exciting, and I don't know if other people have noticed, but the team is out volunteering in the community and helping at so many events, and I think that's really nice to see as well. So yes, thank you, Ms. Butler and CAO McClure for the work that you've done on this, and I think it's great for our community. So the recommendation is before council. Should I read the whole recommendation out?
Through your worship, they'd have to be two separate motions. So if we can please handle them separately, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. So the first item is the recommendation is that council directs staff to enter into a new Smoke Eaters facility use agreement for a 5-year term, 2024 to 2029, with an additional 5-year renewal clause, with the license fee being $1 for the first 5 years of the agreement. Councillor Hansen, is there a seconder, please? Councillor Cashel, and all those in favor? Thank you. That was carried unanimously. And the second recommendation is that council accept the $1 million $1 million donation from the Murphy Family Foundation in support of the arena upgrades, including installation of shock absorbing acrylic boards, purchase of extra set of acrylic glass for storage and use, upgrading of the concrete cooling flooring, and replacement of the sound system. Someone want to make that recommendation, please? Councillor Wilson, a seconder, please. Councillor Hansen, all those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 2.2, I'll pass that on to Ms. Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is the long anticipated update of our council procedures bylaw. And the intent tonight is to present you with the draft. Going through it today, I found a couple of errors myself, so please feel free to speak up with any of those that you find. It's a fairly large bylaw, so it does help to have as many eyes on it as possible. What I really hope to accomplish tonight is just a robust discussion on what's been included in this, and is it the direction that council wants to go, or do they see anything different? As I was saying previously, I have no skin in the game in this. It is your procedures bylaw and how you want to conduct your meetings. So I will just open it up to the floor throughout this discussion if you have comments, questions, or you want to have a robust discussion between yourselves about, is that what we really want, or do we want to see something different? So I'll just start it off with why a new bylaw. So our current council procedures bylaw 2558 was drafted in 2004. It has had some amendments throughout, mostly to include legislative changes through the Local Government Act or the Community Charter. But what I'm presenting to you today is a bit more on a best practices scenario. So a few changes along that way. And I just thought there was an awful lot of updates and some language changes and just the way we say things now, that it was easier just to draft a brand new bylaw. So that's why we're going with a new one. Enhancements to this one are going to include electronic meetings enhancements, order of proceedings and business for that, not only for our regular meetings, but also for our committee of the whole meetings. Parameters around delegations and question period. It also includes question period in regular and committee of the whole, and notices of motion. And through this presentation, you'll notice that I speak about committee of the whole instead of what we're currently under, which is our
Governance and
operations.
Governance and Operations Committee meeting. I'm not sure why it ever became a Governance and Operations Committee meeting, because when you read the terms of reference, it's very much mirrors what a committee of the whole meeting would be. Committee of the whole is, the language of committee of the whole is more known throughout local government. So I'm proposing to you that we bring it back to committee of the whole. And so that's the one I'm going for. You'll notice that. Okay, so first page, what's new in definitions. We just outlined what ACT means throughout, that the administrator is our chief administrative officer, what a chairperson is. We didn't have those definitions before. And we've included city website. So in 2004, I don't think we had a city website, or if we did, we didn't use it as robustly as we do now. So there are references throughout the bylaw about the website. Members, just so we're clear that a member is a council meeting member or a committee member. Notices of meetings. So this is the way that we give notice of meetings coming up. In the bylaw, it still talked about sticking it in the council meeting mailboxes within City Hall. And we don't have those anymore. We have email mailboxes. So we've updated the language for that as well. Notice of motion. So that is a way for council to formally put forward a motion in a regular meeting. So we would define that later on. And public notice posting locations. So we've updated that to include the city's website. Okay. So just a little bit on the next page, which is just application of rules and procedures within the bylaw. And it just talks about Robert's Rules of Order, that if something is not in this bylaw, that we default to Robert's Rules of Order. But before we default to Robert's Rules of Order, council can also make amendments to the procedures bylaw and how they want to handle things. So always knowing that we don't have to follow Robert's rules, we can amend and make something different in the procedures bylaw. Inaugural meeting. So change there. It used to say first Monday in November. We've now changed it to the first 10 days in November. That gives us some flexibility in case we want to hold a meeting. I mean, it's been in this region, there's been communal meetings where we've had necessarily the inaugural meeting, but the swearing-in ceremony. So once council has actually gone and sworn in, they're a council member. So just giving a bit more flexibility, and I'm not sure if anybody has any strong opinions on whether it be the first Monday or within that 10 days. I don't think that's a big change. Okay. Time and location of meetings. Not a lot of changes there. Still keeping that second and fourth Monday. Still keeping the one meeting in July, August, and December. Just changing in October when it is an election year that we only have one meeting. So you don't want to have a meeting after you've had the election and before the new council is sworn in. So just one meeting in October. Also flexibility around AKBLG and UBCM dates if we need to change from second and fourths to first and thirds, just to give us that flexibility. And adjournment now at 10 p.m. instead of 11. And I don't know if anybody really wants to stay later than 10, but if you do, speak up now. You may be here alone.
Well, and we can be flexible on that. right?
Exactly. All it
In
takes
heat of the
The motion.
discussion.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
okay.
Yeah, everything can be amended by a council resolution. Okay, electronic meetings. So we are asking as staff that if you know you're going to be participating electronically, that you give us 24 hours notice. And that's just so that we can make sure that you've got the links and that we're set up and we don't have any of those IT situations. We know that if you're sick, there are situations where you can't give us that 24 hours notice, but if possible, we do ask for that. And the bylaw does speak to that it can be waived, the 24-hour notice by the mayor or by their chief administrative officer. So of course, in situations, emergency for sure, that we would waive that. Now, one of the other changes we put in here, and this is for your discussion, when COVID came along, we changed our bylaws to say that the presiding member could be participating electronically. Now with COVID leaving, hopefully, or not as unknown, many councillors are changing back to the presiding member needs to physically be at the meeting. And I don't know how council feels about that. There's a lot of reasons to have your chair in the meeting and not electronic. But that is a discussion for you guys. I'd like to hear your input on that.
Makes sense to have the chair at the meeting.
Mhm. Okay. Physically at the meeting.
Physically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And then also just a statement about when we do have IT problems, that if you are in remotely chiming in and something goes wrong, but we still have quorum, the meeting continues. We don't wait until that person comes back. If we think it's just like frozen for a few minutes, of course, we would be kind enough to wait and not charge ahead. But if it seems that things are going in and out a lot, the meeting just proceeds, unless of course quorum is dropped, and then the meeting is adjourned. So the other thing we're asking is to please, it's sometimes really difficult for staff when you are remote to see your hands. Sometimes you might like move your hand to go onto your keyboard at the time of voting, and we can't really tell if you're doing this. So to put your hand up and say, I'm in favor, or just some kind of verbal indication really helps, especially for your worship when she's trying to figure out if it's everybody or nobody.
Mm-hmm.
So just being really vocal, I think, is what we're asking.
I'm in favor.
Thank you. Okay. So then our next thing, that just a couple of comments.
Sorry, Tracy.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
No.
I'm looking at the loss of quorum if there's an equipment failure. So what would that look like though, if the meeting is we lose
If we-
quorum during because computer shut down.
Yeah, so if something happens and we lose quorum, the meeting would be adjourned
Okay,
because you can't hold a meeting when you don't have quorum. So, I mean, you would
Right.
probably give it the 15 minutes to see if you can get your quorum back. But if you don't, then the meeting would be
then we have
adjourned.
to call it. So
Yeah.
that would be
And you
the
can't
people that
continue
yeah.
with,
are physically at the meeting would call the adjournment.
yes.
Okay.
And just, it's not in the PowerPoint, but section 3.1, the acting mayor, I just want to make sure that next time we do a motion around acting or deputy, we'll talk about that in a second too, that we need to specify in that resolution whether that acting is for a year or for the term. So if you're putting in a motion to say that the council be on a rotational via alphabet or something like that, for the term or for the year, because some councils will do it just year by year, some will do it for the term, some will do just appoint somebody for the whole period of the term, just one person. So we just need to be really specific in those resolutions. So after the next, I don't think I have to look at what we did this time, but I don't think there was necessarily a specific term or year in that statement.
Well, we did it on a monthly rotation.
But we didn't say if that monthly rotation was
Would be
for the
4
term
years.
or for
Oh,
a
I
year.
see.
So
Okay.
just need to specify.
Okay.
Yeah. And just noting that if in the event that the office of the mayor becomes vacant, that a acting mayor or deputy mayor takes place for the whole period of time and until that mayor is replaced through an election. So, yeah, exactly. Okay, so just, Councillor Butler had a really good question for me about, do we refer to them as deputy mayor or acting mayor? And I think, from what I understand, Trail is used to calling it a deputy mayor. And I'm fine with that language, and perhaps we just use that throughout the bylaw. So comments on that?
What's the practice sort of provincially, like?
So from the website, it says the deputy mayor is a councillor appointed by other members of the city council to act as a mayor in the absence or incapacity of the mayor according to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. The acting mayor is the councillor who is appointed by fellow council members to act as the mayor in the absence or incapacity of both mayor and deputy mayor. So it's you deputize someone or someone acts on your behalf when you cannot do the job, i.e. you step down, run away. Whereas the deputy mayor refers to someone as the mayor is still in the chair, but someone,
Okay.
but in her absence or his absence, then it'd be.
What do you recommend, Councillor Butler?
Well, like I also just think back to what people in Trailer used to use, and the word has always been deputy.
Okay.
And then it also conflicts with that other point in the bylaw, sort of about what happens when, because there's two scenarios, right?
Right.
There's one where the mayor is still the mayor and someone's acting on her behalf. And then there's another situation where that person is,
Not coming.
no, yeah. but
It could be
some-
gone for a
gone
lengthy
bit, yes,
period
yeah,
of
exactly,
time.
like
Yeah.
something's happened.
So my suggestion would be that we amend 3.1 to refer to deputy mayor, except for 3.1D, we leave that saying acting mayor because D is the one that talks about if it's a long-term absence or a resignation.
Mhm.
Make sense?
Makes sense?
Okay.
So, and also in D as well, it says that council shall appoint a member of council to be the acting mayor, right?
Mhm.
So it's not, the mayor doesn't get to choose who the
Well, the
acting
mayor
mayor.
may not be here.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it would be the body of council deciding.
Exactly, yeah.
And I really highly suggest you never flip a coin because that happened in Rosslyn once and it wasn't a good scenario to decide who was going to be the acting mayor.
So, General Manager Butler, would you say then that it's 3.1 acting mayor and or deputy mayor and acting mayor, or would you do 3-1?
No, I think what I'm going to do is change 3.1 to deputy mayor
Mhm.
and all through talk about deputy mayor until D. And I think I'm going to amend the definitions. Yeah. Make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. The other one that I wanted to talk a little about is 4.2 attendance in public meetings. And so 4.2F that we have just put in for clarification, what is unwarranted behavior in a meeting. And I just think sometimes that needs to be spelled out, especially if we are referring to this section in a heated meeting. The chair can definitely speak to, according to 4.2F, your behavior is unwarranted. See you later. So that's just for clarification.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Minutes of meetings.
Fair enough.
So the only thing with our meeting minutes is we put in a clause about minor changes. So if we've forgotten an apostrophe or something like that, or a comma, or any of those things, they can be changed without, without any resolution. But if it's a material change to a motion, then definitely it has to come back to the table to be voted on. And only those people that were at the meeting can vote on that change. So if you were absent from that meeting, you are absent from that vote if they are changing material. So does that make sense? So adjourning meetings were no quorum. We changed to 15 minutes from 30 minutes. I think that half an hour is a long time to sit around, especially now when we have text messagings and we can say, are you coming? Are you not? For us just to sit here for 30 minutes is probably an awfully long time. So we have changed that.
General Manager Butler,
Mhm.
may I ask a question? I apologize.
Yeah,
Okay.
please do.
One of the questions that came up actually just about the minutes themselves was how long, we do have these videos that we've been doing.
Mhm.
Do you have any best practices for us that we might be incorporating into our procedural bylaw that would say, a month after the meeting and the minutes have been approved, that then the videos would come down? And again, that was just one of the questions that was discussed. Again, we're down at UBCM, so you're talking about best practices with different councils and that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on the capabilities of your website, right? How long you want stuff to be there. But that is something we could add in to our council procedures bylaw. Something I would like to change here for sure with our meeting minutes is right now we post our minutes in draft form, and I don't think we should do that. I don't think meeting minutes should be posted until they're approved on our website. So I would like to change that practice. But that's just through our staff. We will do that. Because your video is there. If somebody wants to watch something, they can see it, right? But I don't think draft minutes should ever be posted. But when it comes to,
That's
maybe
actually
we want to do it as in a policy.
a good question, because there is a lot of communities that don't record their meetings. I don't know if it's a certain level that they have to be. I know that Fruitvale doesn't. We had that conversation with them. I don't know if it's a certain number of population before we don't record the minutes. I don't know.
There's no set thing. It's
No.
The ombudsman and best practices is you want as many people to see your council meetings as possible. So
Mhm.
how do you do that? How do you get the most public participation and the most people watching what's going on and being informed? So my suggestion would be minimum. You want a year's worth there for sure, so people can go back and see. It's you've got nothing to hide. You want people to know what the discussions are, and you want people to be educated.
Councillor Cashel?
Is there a limited capacity to store these videos? My question would be, why take them down in the first place?
They're stored on YouTube.
Correct,
So
but do
they're
we have
not
limited
stored on our
capacity, or
website.
we reach a maximum capacity? Like, I'm just wondering why we would worry about ever taking them down if they're there.
It's sometimes, Councilor Castro, what we're seeing out there is people that will grab portions of maybe capture you saying something in one meeting and something in another meeting, kind of putting it together, which has no context because the video is up there, right? So there's those sorts of behaviors that people are seeing. So again, that's just one of the things that was discussed. I know that it was also at the KPLG. There was, again, it was just one of those things. We're down at UBCM, and there was some of that discussion about what does council want? I mean, that would be the question, of course, for you guys. But those are the sorts of things that people taking things out of context. If you've only got 3 words in a sentence and they chop, Councilor Casual saying this with nothing else, what risk is there? Is there a risk? Maybe council says we're not concerned about that. But that's just again some of the discussion that's going around with some of the challenges that councils are seeing that have had their videos on.
Thank you.
And I would suggest policy is probably the first place to start with that instead of bylaw, so you can see how things are going. So that would require council to pass a resolution that staff be directed to draft a policy.
Okay. Councillor Butler had a comment?
I was just gonna say, it's interesting to hear that it's being brought up in a bigger audience, like down at the UBCM as well, because it was a discussion with the AKBLG. So.
And that was more individual, wasn't? I didn't go to
okay.
I didn't go to an
because
event.
at the AKBLG, it was brought up as a
Right.
sort of in
Yeah.
a discussion,
Legal.
in a workshop. So, yeah, I would be kind of in favor of also. I mean, minutes will be retained. I'm assuming indefinitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if someone really wants to go back to see what happened in 1957, they can. And
1965 is our
65,
earliest
okay.
that we have.
and but I would be in favor of sort of something like a policy change, like 6 weeks or
For the video to
for the
stay
video to
active?
stay active and then to be deleted. Yeah.
I would be opposed to that. I think it's too short. I think it should be staying up. You recommended the year. My recommendation would be to leave it as is and let the video stay. And if there is, are we concerned about what CEO Burgess mentioned about piecemealing? Have we seen that? Have we experienced that? I haven't yet in two years. I don't know if it's anything to be concerned about, to be frank. I think it should stay. Those videos might come in handy. Who knows when? Down the road, 2 or 3 years down the road, it could be something that might be an important piece of reference. Why would we want to delete them? I'm perplexed by that. I just don't see any logic for it, other than what some of the explanations have been given. Thank you, Your Worship.
Yeah, and we can talk about that at another time.
Sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next one is the agenda itself. And right now we have that reports need to be to us, Sandy and I, by 12 noon on Wednesday. That cuts things pretty short for us. And then it also talks about that council will receive their agenda package by the end of day Thursday. So just some discussion about, is that enough time? Should we be looking at bumping it up a day? You tell me. What are we finding?
I'm personally okay with it being received on the Thursday.
Thank you.
Quite often it's been the Friday, and that's understandable as well with staffing shortages and that.
But it shouldn't be the norm, Councilor Castro. And so we recognize that too. We know that we're put council in some tough spots with having them out late. So
Sure, absolutely.
I think as long as it's not received on Monday.
that's in the bylaw. Well, that's
Well, but I do, okay, you go ahead, Councillor Benson.
I just want to say maybe if there, maybe if it's like a specifically like difficult report or something, a bit more complicated, a bit more time so that we can ask questions as needed, would be good. But for the norm, I'm fine with Thursday.
I would be the same as well. I think just if it's something that has a lot of reading to it, very stacked, to have time to be able to fully read it, process it, and then be able to ask questions before, so that everybody can be adequately prepared for Monday. Having more time to get information as opposed to on the fly an hour beforehand trying to make a decision. I think it's better to have a bit more time than less time.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the zoning bylaw was a good example of that.
Yes, great example. That one, we almost could have met about it on a Monday to then decide about it at our next meeting. There was that much involved then.
Yeah,
Great.
for sure.
Thanks.
Okay. So the
Well,
next
Ms. Benson has
Just one
her-
more question on that, if I may, Madam Butler, is that enough time for you and Sandy, having them by noon on Wednesday?
Yeah, we just need to work with our management team to make sure they understand that that's a hard deadline for us. So we will continue to crack the whip.
I think the CAO may be the bottleneck on some of these situations as
We
well.
will crack the whip. Okay, so the next big one is the order of proceedings and business. So this is the order for our regular meeting, not our cow meeting. So made a few changes there, really looking for some input here. Part of my vision here is that we have any of our committees, whether it's the Airport Advisory Committee, the Community Safety Task Force, the Accessibilities Committee, all those committees we have formal minutes of those and they come forward to a regular meeting. And that's normal practice for those minutes to be published, and also that the recommendations within them are coming to council so that committees are not making decisions without council endorsement. So that's why I put in adoption of committee of the whole special and regular meeting minutes, and then the committee of the whole recommendations, which we have been doing. And then reports and minutes of council committees. So this is where I see each councillor who's on those committees, the chair, speaking at that time to say, these are the minutes, this is what happened at the meeting, highlight anything that we need to be aware of. And also that council, if there is a motion, that council can make a motion to support or not support what the committee is doing. So that was my vision there. Also, regional district, we really do need a formal spot on our regular meeting agenda, even if there's nothing to report. Sorry, Terry, that we talk about what's happening at the regional level, because people really, again, this is educating the public. People don't really understand the partnership with a regional district and a city. So I think it's really important that those be highlighted. The next one is mayor's report. So I'm not sure if you've seen that I've dropped the members report. And part of that is so that we are reporting about those things that are at committee level and not just the things that really don't have a lot of substance. If you feel that you've attended something and there is a lot of substance, I would suggest that you speak to the mayor and that they refer to you during their mayor's report that, you know, Councillor Hanson is going to take over from here and she's going to report on blah, 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 blah. So, but that again is up for debate. If everybody likes their moment, you know, in a meeting to talk about what they've attended, that's fine too. And then the next one is the notice of motions, and we'll talk about that as we move forward. And then just a statement at every meeting to say this is when our next meeting is, just to keep the public informed. This is the next one. There may be a special meeting coming up, like an OCP meeting or something, so we want to make sure we're sort of using our meeting as advertisement as well. And then question period at the end. And my question to you, is that the best place? A lot of thoughts go into that. Question period is supposed to be questions about what's on the agenda, right? So often if you get people to sit through a council meeting before they ask a question, you've answered their question during that meeting.
Mm-hmm.
But if council would rather have them there first thing and have them all leave quickly after, that's up to you. You know, your input on that is appreciated.
I just think we have to get back to sticking, and you do a good job of that, Mayor Jones, but your questions have to relate to what's on the agenda. Case closed. I think if we get back to that and just not even open up the opportunity for the one-off chance of them or anyone coming in and talking about it. And then at least that way we can stay on track.
I actually like the idea of the question period at the end. I find it when people come in and then they go and everybody kind of leaves at once and you're trying to carry on with business, you actually kind of have to stop and they're all chatting. And so saying, okay, you know what, it's going to be at the end, because you were right, Jen Butler, like when we have our reports, we sometimes answer a lot of these questions with reports about the Community Safety Task Force or certain things that are going on that people want to speak to anyways. And had they kind of got to the end of that and heard of the things that we're advocating and meetings we've been having, that sometimes a lot of those kind of situations will not be as prominent, knowing that we're working on those things that people are bringing up. So I personally, I think it's a great idea.
It makes sense to have it at the end as well, because lots of times they come to speak about something on the agenda and we haven't had the chance to have the conversation amongst council. So in order to answer the question, we're putting the question before the answer. And I know that you know what I mean? Like if we work through the council meeting, the answer would be there. Councillor Cashel.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with both Mayor Jones and Councillor Hanson. Heading at the end makes sense, but I'm just putting myself in a situation now where I'm a senior. I'm not on the internet. I don't know what the agenda is for this current meeting that's coming up, but I've got something that I really want to talk to council about. So I show up to the meeting and I sit through and I approach the podium and identify myself as a Trail resident. And then I say, I have something I want to talk about, but it's not on the agenda. What do we do? Or we're not going to be able to entertain that particular person on that situation. I think we should be able to. I think that people should be able to come in and address us on issues that may not be on the agenda, because not everybody is following our agendas on social media, and we don't see it published in the Trail Times or anything like that. So I'd like to have a little bit more of an openness around that, so that people can come in and it may be something we can address, but at least give them the opportunity to make it known to us.
So we do in 412 on a question period, the wording there is all questions must pertain to items that are ideally on the current agenda or issues council is presently dealing with, or on any other issues that are of interest to the general public. And my question there was that language be okay? So
Yeah, and I did read that when I read over this, and thank you. That's a good coverage. Thank you.
So, but yeah, go ahead.
What's the expectation to answer the question right then and there?
There isn't one. Council reserves the right to defer responding to a question or in order to obtain the information required to provide a response. That's also.
I like that idea of just having time to think about it and getting the proper answer as opposed to on the fly.
Yeah.
Things get missed or whatever.
We shouldn't, the mayor should never feel pressure to answer a question,
For sure.
right? Like, thank you for your question. We'll get back to you. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that.
Yeah.
So,
Can I follow up on that? When we get back to someone who asks a question, is there a procedure for that? Is it a letter? Is it a phone call? Is it an email?
usually email.
Email.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Unless
and then we
maybe in this
CC,
case,
then we
if
can
it was-
CC everybody.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So we're okay with that order?
Mhm.
Are we okay with no council reporting other than committee reporting?
I'm totally okay with that, personally.
Just wanted seeking some clarification. So in meetings that we're not chairing though, but attending as council delegates, are we still to provide a written report to that or not to speak to it at all? For example, the Lower Columbia Community Development Team Society, the Chamber of Commerce, the Downtown Trail Improvement Committee, some of us are council delegates on those things, but we're not the chairs of those. So do we submit those minutes then on behalf of that committee meeting or speak to those particular things that are going on as it might be of information for all of council?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that's really up to you. I think what we're trying to get away from is just saying, and I attended the Chamber of Commerce meeting and having no substance to what was at that Chamber of Commerce meeting. So that would be up to those organizations. If they want to provide us with their minutes, we could definitely put them in the consent agenda, in the reading file. That's up to council. if you feel like you need to say something about them, I would suggest if there's something that important happening at those committees, that's where we talk about making sure you talk to the mayor so that she can address you during her report to say, Councillor Hanson has some further information on the Chamber of Commerce meeting of blah, 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 and hand it over to her councillor.
Personally,
Go ahead.
I have no issue myself with you're on a committee and you're not the chair, like you just mentioned, and you're bringing us an update of that committee. I mean, it's all committee related. It's, to me, it's relevant. Where I'm seeing where it's, like, for example, I'll just use this as an example, I went to the Legion. I'm kind of, as a city rep or on my own dime, and I spent some time there on open house. Well, that's got nothing to do with any committee. Really, do I need to mention that? No. And that's the kind of stuff that we can get avoid a lot
That's what it's
of,
turned into a little bit.
yeah, like, look, how busy I am and all these photo ops I attended, when really they're not committee related.
Yeah, exactly.
But if it's a committee, if you're on one, even though you're not the chair, I think it would be important to give an update.
Mhm. I
Personally,
think that would come under reports and minutes of council committees, wouldn't it? Because they're still appointed to those committees. If there's a resolution coming.
They're not committees of council though. They're just,
I see.
they're council liaisons. They're not actually
right,
in the committee. So that's where I would suggest if you are a liaison and there's something important to come forward from those liaising meetings,
put it through the mayor.
put it through the mayor and then make sure you've got a spot instead of taking up a whole spot in an agenda.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
So, and I just have another clarification for 7A7. Should be Kootenai Boundary Regional District.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. Okay. All right, so we're good to move on that one?
Just a question, if I may. Do we have a list of which one is a committee and which ones are like liaisons?
We definitely should. We can come up with that for you for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. And then previously our minutes, for example, like the Community Safety Task Force, they went in the, and Silver City Days, they went in the reading file. So would those go as part of the Wednesday at noon?
Yes,
Perfect. Thank you.
okay.
So can you give me an idea of correspondence for information and/or action?
Yeah, so that would just be letters coming in or grant applications coming in. When people are asking something of council, or it's just an information letter, maybe a letter from the ministry or something that's just
Okay.
information. So, and then the same thing where council can pull those out if they need action. So, and that'll be up to council whether they pull them out or not from that list.
Okay.
It's not any different than really what we're doing right now. So just highlighting, what is it, 49G? Just about being really clear if you want your vote recorded, if you're not in agreement with the majority. I think this group's been really good about that, but it just really helps those taking minutes if you're really clear that you do want your name, and just a reminder that if you don't vote, you are voting in the affirmative. So not putting your hand up means you said yes.
Tracy, for people joining remotely, do we also voice that when we say I'm in favor? Do you want us to say that's a
Yes.
negative? Okay.
Yes, for sure. For sure. That's negative. Yeah, that's I vote opposed is probably the right. I like that. So, and I've also added 410 about a 15-minute recess. That's just to give your mayor some, it could be that you've had a very lengthy delegation and you need a 15-minute break after it because people are leaving, and instead of just everyone sitting there, just call a recess until the, people have left, or that there's been a really, a hot topic or something that we just need to take a break. Yeah, so just adding some flexibility. Then the next one is our delegations. So council has never had any parameters around delegations. So added a few things here. I don't know if it's too strict, if you're okay with it. Also limiting us to 2 delegations just so that we actually can get to the business of council along with having 2 delegations. Restricting that time to 15 minutes. That includes your question period. So, and of course, there's always, council can pass a resolution to extend that, or perhaps we know that it's, we have a delegation coming up next meeting where it's 2 groups coming together. So we've offered them 30 minutes because both groups have to give a presentation, but they're kind of together, but kind of separate. So we just made that call that that is the one delegation for that meeting. And then some parameters about the power to refuse delegations. So you can probably see in there, if a delegation has previously addressed council or a committee on the same issue and no new material information is being provided, so this will stop people coming back just to keep hammering council.
Yeah.
So, and that the corporate officer has the power to refuse a delegation going on the agenda if they don't feel that it has anything to do with council, but people can appeal that as well. So some flexibility there. So I don't know how everyone's feeling about the parameters on that, if they like them, if they don't think, they think they're too restrictive. And also the point about council not acting on a delegation unless it's a unanimous vote to act on it at that meeting.
So I have a question on E, the zoning bylaws. Now, I thought that had changed through the government. We didn't have to have those,
Some you do.
we
A
still have
lot of
to.
them you don't. But if you
Okay.
do have to have a public hearing, then that still refers to.
Okay,
Yeah. But the majority you don't have to anymore.
okay,
You are
so
correct.
we probably won't use that one.
Not very often, no.
Okay.
I think Councillor Cashel has a question.
Sorry.
Oh, thank you, Mary Jo.
Councilor
Yeah,
Cass.
I'm just wondering, do we need any language in there? I like the 15 minutes. I think that's fair. Maybe at the 13-minute mark, a staff member can kind of give some kind of you have 2 minutes left. Do we need anything,
I don't think we need that in
No?
the bylaw, but
Okay.
we will make note of that
make that
and
a practice?
get an egg timer.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just give, then it gives them that opportunity to do a wrap up and they're not
For
like,
sure.
15's over, you know?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, we always want to be respectful for those people that have spent the time to put a delegation together and come forward. So if we go over a few minutes, we go over a few minutes, but just trying to give people the idea that please don't come thinking you're going to get an hour in front
Right.
of council. Because 2 delegations at 1 hour, we're going to be making that motion to go past 10.
Midnight snack.
So the next one is question period. So a lot of options here, have put in some fairly stringent language to keep it into some timeframes there. Don't know how council's feeling about that. I do think it's a good idea at the front of every question period for the chair to read a prepared statement so people understand what's expected of them at the podium.
Yeah.
I
Yes,
think that's great.
totally agree.
I do think there should be limits, else you end up being here for a long period of time,
Yep.
especially if your question period's at the end of your council meeting.
I have-
Yeah.
Just
Councilor Cashel.
Thank you, Mary Jo. Just a question on 412D. Each question must be limited to 2 minutes, with a total of 15 minutes per question period.
So the total question period on the agenda is 15 minutes,
If there,
but each question, if somebody comes up to the podium, they've got 2
so
minutes.
15 minutes is allotted. Shouldn't it be maybe 16 minutes?
I like the math. I like the
I'm
math.
not-
Yeah, I like the math too.
Yeah.
So then you've only got a minute because we've already used up. I'm just,
I think that, by the time one person comes up and talks for 2 minutes, then they go sit down, and then
Yeah.
the next person
so
comes
the
up.
whole,
You're not gonna get exactly 8 people. You're gonna get 5.25 people maybe.
So all that in between time is all part of the
It's
15
all
minutes?
part of that 15 minutes.
People are
Okay.
gonna be pushing each other out the way to get to the podium.
I mean, I wouldn't have a problem with, let's say we allowed eight question periods of 2 minutes each or something, then everybody gets their 2 minutes. No? Okay.
That's up to council.
Yeah.
This is your procedures bylaw.
Why don't we see how this goes? And then, I mean, if we have to come back to it, we can.
Fair enough. So 15 minutes, hopefully will be long enough for everybody to make their piece.
And
Okay, thank you.
are we good with, as I was talking about 412B, the language that says, or any other issues that is of interest to the general public? Are we okay with that language, or would you like to tighten it up?
I'm okay with it personally.
Well, but when you think about it though, if a question comes that we don't have the answer and it's not on the agenda, hasn't been on the agenda, we have to refer it back to staff.
Yeah, and you have that in E.
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure we're.
It does open that door, that's all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's
all
it.
I'm
We
saying.
kind of talk about having the meeting, we've gone through the meeting, questions are supposed to be what's on the agenda. Are you comfortable with that? Because you are opening up that door, is there a way to tighten it a bit? It's just something to think about, because we have time, this is just at GMC
yeah.
now, so something you don't have to answer today, but something that you may want to consider.
I will bring this back to another GOC after I've made a few changes and got it, and then we'll take it to council after that, just to make sure we're all
Right.
really comfortable.
Good.
Okay.
I wonder if there's a way to, because sometimes we have individuals that come in and they kind of have a very lengthy statement without actually just a question. So maybe if there was a way, or I don't know what policies or best practices from other councils are about, them identifying the question first and then having the statement to
Ooh,
follow
yes.
I
it.
think that's why we have the 2 minutes there.
Only 2 minutes.
You got
And-
2
and
minutes.
I think the other part too, Councillor
Like that.
Hanson, is that reading out before we start saying this is public question period. You have to ask a question and you've got 2 minutes, that whole kind of preamble. And again, maybe some that don't like that and may chafe against that, but that's again, us doing the best that we can to sort of say, here's what we expect the question period to involve.
Okay, nope, that's great. Thank you.
Nick has an interest.
Sorry, Councillor Cashel, go ahead.
Is 2 minutes the norm?
There is no norm.
There's no kind of like what's standard practice, what's best practice?
Everybody's different. I mean, I've seen also a question period called public input period, and that can lead to just people standing at the podium and having their 2 cents, right? So I think 2 minutes is fair, because sometimes people need to make a statement to outline their question and why they're asking
Yeah,
the
of course.
question.
Okay,
Um,
so we're all good with 2 minutes?
we don't want somebody to just get up there in the minute and go, blah, 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 blah.
And again, too, remembering this is going to be a work in progress.
Yeah, we
I'm
can
sure,
always
again, as council looks at this, it sounds like from GM Butler that it's going to be something that we're going to bring back again. So I know that all of you, or many of you, will have some deep thoughts and do some looking at and say, hey, I like this and I like that. And that's part of having the best practices. You want to have the best procedural bylaw at the end of the day that a municipality has. So, we hope that you'll look into that and tell us what you think, and we'll make adjustments that council wants to have. Understanding that it is just a bylaw. So if we go in and we find that what we've suggested is not working,
We
I mean, the
amend it.
beauty of this is that we've now got something updated. Maybe you're tweaking this point and that point in a month or 2 months or 6 months, but now you've got a real solid bylaw overall.
And can we just talk about G for a second, please? That's the member of the public that comes in and they're disrespectful. So we just ask them to step away from the podium. They can still be in the chambers.
Yes, but if they still, you go back to the beginning of the bylaw that it talked about conduct, and then you can ask them to leave.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, if it gets bad enough, that's when you have to, of course, intervene with
Okay.
members of the RCMP if necessary, And it could be a council member too, but, luckily we have such a great council, we don't have to worry about
Why are
that.
you looking at me, regardless?
I wonder why.
For the record, I'm totally kidding.
So not on my PowerPoint presentation, but I just want to talk about 413 manner of address. Just that I have seen us get a little bit lax, that we do have to go through the chair. Of course, at committee of the whole meetings, like where we are right now, it's a little bit more relaxed, but definitely in our regular meetings, we want to make sure that we're always going through the chairs. So, these kind of meetings, we're having discussion. Sometimes it doesn't go that way, but if we can please work towards trying to go through the chair, that is great to keep order. And to stop, we are so lucky. We have such a great team here. We don't have people speaking over top of each other, which is great. But if you do end up in that situation, we just want some language in the procedures bylaw that we can refer to. So my next one is, I just want to talk about is H. So 415H. I have different thoughts about limiting speech at a council meeting for council members. I don't, with this team, this is unnecessary language, but sometimes you do need it. But it's up to council whether they want any type of language in there about limiting speech in a council meeting. So just asking for your thoughts.
Oh, sorry, Council Butler, go
I
ahead.
was just going to give some, I believe that was already in the previous bylaw with a 2-time limit on the same subject. So to me, it makes sense
What's in there?
what's in there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
I don't
that
think
is
it's a
standard.
limiting.
And it's, I've seen like Cascar has the same language. Roslyn has no limiting of speech for council members. So it's just what we want tonight. And I don't think there's any harm in having it in there. If you need it, it's there. If you don't, good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay. Oh, and I'm just going to talk about motions generally. 416. Voting, of course, in a regular meeting, you need a first and seconder, but not in a committee of the whole meeting. So we'll talk about that as we get to the committee of the whole. And then the motions that are referred to in the list there, if anybody wants to know what to lay on the table is, it's not physically laying on the table. This is the definition from Robert's Rules. Lay on the table, lay the main motion aside temporarily without setting a time for resuming its consideration, but with the provision it can be taken up whenever at a majority's decision. So I don't necessarily recommend ever laying anything on the table. I always think that you should put a date to it. If council wants to reconsider it, it's either put it to another council meeting or a certain date or until staff report is received, rather than anybody laying on the table. Sorry, Bev, no more dancing on the table.
I don't approve.
You could see that in the term or something.
Yes, exactly. You could use it, yeah. In my 30 years, I've seen it used once, and everyone just looked at each other. What's laid on the table? So, and just a reminder that when a motion does not receive a seconder, it's dead. That's the end of the discussion. There is no discussion. If there's anything else there. So notices of motion, I know this is something new and hasn't been used in the council, so I've just provided everybody with a sample of 2 recent ones that I've seen come through, just so you have an idea of what a notice of motion looks like. And basically what happens there is if it's something that a councillor feels is strong enough about, but it isn't sort of on our radar to deal with, they can bring it forward in a formal manner. So the idea is that at one regular meeting, you provide your notice of motion to council for them to look at and consider, have a 2-week sort of information gathering for themselves. And then it goes back on the agenda for the following meeting, and that's when the actual discussion and debate happens on that notice of motions. So I think it's a really good way to make sure that motions going forward from council have enough debate and enough information is shared when you provide one.
So when does that come up on the agenda?
That
When would a
is,
counselor or?
it's
someone
near
do
the
that?
end on the list of proceedings.
Okay.
So yeah, in writing on the next meeting agenda for consideration. And if somebody does put forward a notice of motion, we do not take a delegation for that notice of motion. So the notice of motion has to be dealt with. You don't get a delegation prior to that being discussed.
Councillor Cashaw.
Thank you. Is this the language we're expected to use? Or so let's say I come into council next meeting and I have a motion that I want to bring forward the following meeting. Am I expected to write it out, whereas, or
You're
can I
probably
just-
expected to talk to your corporate services team, and they will help you draft a motion so that you can get your point of view forward and why you're bringing it forward. That's what the whereas statements are.
So if I want, bear with me here. If I have a motion I want to bring forward, I would come in and make an appointment with you perhaps? Is that what you're
Yeah.
suggesting? And I
Yeah.
would come in and say, Ms. Butler, I want to make a motion on this particular issue, and then we can discuss it.
And then
You
help
would
you
help me
out.
with the language?
Yeah.
And then I would present it at that meeting, subsequent to the meeting. With that
And I mean,
other-
it can be very simple. It can be says, whereas council received a delegation on blah, blah, blah concerning da, da, da. I move that.
Because what's being presented is basically going to be, in theory, the motion, like once it's done. So, okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. Thank you.
Everyone's good with that one then?
Mhm.
And then just 421 reconsideration by council members, just to remember that the mayor's right for consideration is within the community charter. If you want something reconsidered, the mayor can put it forward at that meeting or within 30 days of that meeting. With council members, if they want something reconsidered, it has to be at the next meeting. That's the limitations on that. So it can't go for, yeah, okay?
And then 24 hours for bylaws.
Yes, in 24 hours for bylaws, correct. So yeah, so adjournment, as I said, change from 10 to 11. Of course, we can stay till midnight if we like, but just needs council resolution to stay. So I don't know what it's been like here, how many late night ones you've had, but I think past 10 o'clock, people's brains are mush anyway, so. With our bylaws, just remove the 24-hour notice. Don't really like council getting motions or bylaws on Sundays before council meetings. So basically, if a bylaw is to be considered, it needs to be in the agenda. So I don't think anybody would have a problem with that.
But you are noting that the 24 hours, if you've gone from first 3 readings and adoption, that is
Yes,
okay.
that
is okay.
stays, yeah.
That is okay.
But no,
that
what I'm
wouldn't,
saying
that
about
wouldn't
it-
happen on Sunday anyway. It would be at a meeting and then we would have a day.
Exactly. So just, you can't, give a new bylaw to council on a Sunday night.
Right.
I'm expecting them to have it, deal with it on the Monday. Yeah. Okay, so the next one is going into committee of the whole. And first of all, I just want to ask the question, is everybody okay with going to our language changing from committee of the whole? And then probably I'll put in a resolution that we no longer hold governance and operations meetings, that they be changed to committee of the whole. That would be a motion coming forward in the future. I don't know, I haven't been here before. I don't know if anybody has any love of the language.
It is funny when you talk about our cow meeting now.
Yeah.
Oh, I know, you hear that so often when you
I
go
was
some.
just gonna say that, Paul, or Councillor Butler. So the cow meeting.
But you hear people talk about their cow meetings and it's like,
Yeah, it is the
Yeah.
normal language
okay,
throughout the industry, so.
okay.
Sorry, guys, we're going to cow. And then I put in an order of business. And my vision for this is making sure that we have our managers giving us a verbal update at every meeting so that they don't have to be here physically. They can come in on Zoom, and it would be like Enrico giving us an update on what's happening at the airport, or it could be, Ben letting us know that the potholes on 4th Avenue have been filled in, or any of those types of things. And I think it's a good opportunity for council members to ask questions of our staff. Of course, always being respectful, and them also being able to say, I don't know, I'll get back to you. And I think we could handle that well. And then I think what I'd like to see is if we have a staff member coming forward to give a verbal and they do have a staff report, that we deal with that report at that time too. So they're there. If we have any questions about their report, they can answer those at that meeting. So I think it's just getting more people a little bit more open to what's going on. I think it's a good idea.
I think it's a great idea. I really do.
So how many managers are we talking about?
What are we hiring? 42 more managers?
No, but because every 2 weeks, we're gonna be getting manager reports.
Well,
from all the
there may
managers.
not be
A report?
a report, right? Some people might be
Would
on
once a month be
vacation.
enough? Like, is that sufficient? Do we need a,
I think that we would try to, especially in the beginning here, get a pattern of introducing, getting sort of, we may have only one a month to get in front of council as an opportunity to get this going, sort of thing. I think that in the future, though, it could be sort of one of those things that comes, that everyone is prepared and operating so that you're getting an update on something new, and that you're prepared for that at the departmental level. We're not quite there yet, right? We're still sort of building the bench right now as well. And so I think that there would be some work on what's the best way to have council be aware and interact with our managers as well. So yeah, it'll be a
And
work
if
in
it get,
progress.
yeah, and I've seen too where, the GM gives the update for his managers or her managers. But I've also seen it where just the managers do. I mean, a classic example would be our manager of communications and events. We definitely want to hear from her at every meeting about what's new and what's coming up. And where, maybe our utilities manager, he has nothing to report because he hasn't had any big breaks or there's no capital project reports. We wouldn't make them come to say, I don't have a report.
But we also don't want to make it so that there is no report, that there's some sort of pressure about, hey, how come I haven't heard from this person in a while? There's something going on. So.
And then the next one would be the question period. So again, having that with the same restrictions that we talked about previously. So there is an opportunity there. We don't have to have a question period in both, but that's up to council. I don't know how you feel. I mean, people don't often come to question period at a CAL meeting. It's usually at their regular meeting, but
I wonder if people even know that they could come, right?
well, that's another thing, right? Yeah. And, people need to know that all our meetings are open to the public except if they're being held in camera.
Yep.
Even our committee meetings.
Yeah, budget meetings, all of it, right?
Yeah, they're all public. So, well, we'll leave it at that. If anybody has any, it's coming back, so we can talk about it then. So the other thing is at committee of the whole, no seconders required. It's just put the motion on the table and that's it. So we don't need a seconder. 10-minute max to speak to any one question. It's just to sort of, hold some type of, that it's not going on and on and on, and see if that works. If it's, we probably don't even need it with this group, but you never know when you get into, a council that perhaps is not agreeing on a very hot topic. You can discuss bylaws at committee of the whole meetings, but you can't pass readings. So you'll often see a staff report coming back that says that council refer bylaw blah 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 for the required readings at the next regular meeting or something like that. But you can't say that this bylaw be read a first, second time or something like that, because you can't make that decision in a committee meeting. So any questions around committee of the whole? Any concerns about doing this? All good? Okay. Standing and select committees. New language in there is making sure that whenever we have a standing and a select committee, we do have a terms of reference to go with that committee, and that we are using those terms of reference when we're appointing to those committees, and that we do have to post the agendas of what's going to be discussed at those meetings. So there's a 12-hour period. Again, this is so that the general public knows what's going on in those committee meetings and what's being discussed, and so do other council members. So we have that. If if any council member wants to go to any committee meeting, they can. If they want to go to listen, but they can't vote, right? If you're not a member of it, you can't vote at that meeting, even though you're a council member. And then again, the minutes will be included in the regular meeting agenda as per what we discussed previously. Any concerns with that? That is it for me, except just other little things. Just again, recording movers and seconders. I've circulated a little article by Iamina, who is sort of the parliamentary god, about recording movers and seconders. And I'd just like you to read that and let me know what you think about it. I think it's a practice that we could drop if council is in favor of that, because right now we do record who moved things and who seconded things. Don't necessarily think that that's best practice. Yeah. So again, cows do not need the seconder. And the other one is that the chair does not need to declare if something is unanimous. She just has to declare whether it's carried or defeated. So she doesn't need to, unless she feels comfortable doing that. That's up to her. Okay. Again, recording opposed, please speak up. Remembering to always direct your debate through the chair. And when via Zoom, to show your hand and speak up. It's just really helpful for us because it's sometimes hard to see what's going on. And just a reminder that policy is easier to change than bylaw. So always considering what is the best tool, like we talked about with the videos, that perhaps it's policy, not bylaw.
So if I see a council member that is opposed to a motion, is it up to me to ask them if they want it recorded, or is it up to them to
It is
tell
up
me?
to them.
To tell, okay.
Yes. It is always up to the member to voice whether they want to be recorded or not. So I think Councillor Cashel has been really good at speaking up when he wants that.
Getting on the right.
And it's very helpful for us when we're recording minutes.
Councillor Benson, that's her hand up.
Thank you for this, Tracy. I was hoping, could we include something about conflict of interest and when to recuse a vote? I know it's in the community charter, but just a bit more. It's still something that throws me off sometimes.
Mm-hmm. So conflict of interest is solely on the member. So if you feel you have a conflict of interest or even a perceived conflict of interest, it is up to you to declare that.
Okay.
And it's not up to staff to say to you, I believe you have a conflict of interest here. So, and really you do need to think about not only if you have a direct conflict of interest or if it's perceived, and only you can judge whether you feel that the perceived is enough that you should remove yourself from the council meeting.
Okay.
Do you need any more on that one? I can pull out some information on that and share it with you, with council. Yeah.
I think just like being a small town and it's not always a money thing, but it could be, or you have a family member on staff that may be bringing something forward that could definitely be perceived.
For sure. For sure.
Thank you.
Councillor Hanson.
I just had a question, and I mean, this might not be the right spot for this to go, but I noticed there's a lot of communities that write a lot of resolutions and do a lot of policy advocacy. Is that something that would be in this procedural bylaw as part of something that's discussed? Or is it something that would be outside of this? Just
Are you referring to motions coming forward to UBCM, that type of thing?
Yeah, and
So-
AKPLG.
That happens at the council table here, and a lot of that comes through a notice of motion,
Mhm.
where a councillor would put forward that they want this referred to UBCM,
Okay,
and that's how that happens.
okay, no, I just wanted some
Yeah.
clarity around that,
Yeah.
because there's a lot that write a lot of policy or advocacy and resolutions, so I
Yeah.
just was wanting to understand where that fell
Yeah.
into the right spot. Thank you.
And again, that would be like the same as the notice of motion. Please come and talk to us so we make sure whatever we're putting forward is actually gonna help.
Just a bit more.
Yes, go
Thank
ahead,
you.
Councillor.
On the notice of motion, if there's a motion that I wish to make, can we do it by email or do I need to make?
For
it?
sure.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. We're
And
just
then
here to
should I-
help.
I'll direct it through Mr. McClure, copy to you, or kind of directly, because if this is your matter, can I go right directly to you? Am
Yeah,
I?
and again, what I always
copy
kind of,
you in it?
yeah, if I could, please, that
Sure,
would be the
absolutely.
best way. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
Unless it refers to him, then you have to.
It's always good to get the motions a little bit ahead of time.
Oh, no, I agree. I think, and it's fair for staff as well, because I
Yeah,
know I've made
that's
them and then, we're trying to get the language down and it can be a little bit difficult for staff.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, things come up in a council meeting where you do need to put something on the table. It's not restricting you to that. It's just those things that are not the normal business of that agenda, right? That you want to bring forward. So, I mean, I've seen notice of motions over dogs plenty of times. I've seen notices of motion about going to UBCM, referring something to UBCM. I mean, so it can be anything. It can be a motion that you want a bylaw amended and the reasons why you want that bylaw amended.
Thank you.
And part of it is that kind of sober time in between to allow us staff to prepare and,
Of course.
and not just, yeah.
Okay, I don't know if there's any other questions right now. Okay.
Councilor Benson got a question, or is her head just about to
Councillor
explode?
Benson.
And yeah, so the motion that I put forward tonight is just for me to bring it back.
Okay,
So I just need that passed.
so, okay, Councillor Hanson, Councillor Wilson, all those in favor?
I'm in favor.
In favor.
I did it.
That was carried.
Not even enforced yet, and you guys.
We didn't need a second. Well, I guess in a week we won't need a seconder.
Next time, next meeting. Okay, so, one second, see if I can find my motion to adjourn here. Moving into. Sorry, guys. I don't have it. Motion to adjourn. Okay, that's okay, I got it. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is a resolution to adjourn the Governance and Operations Committee portion of the meeting and immediately resolve into in-camera meeting. And the recommendation is that pursuant to Section 90 of the Community Charter, the public be excluded from the meeting as the subject matter being considered relates to the following: the Community Charter, Section 91E, the Community Charter, Section 91G, and the Community Charter, Section 91K. So make that motion, please. Councillor Benson, Councillor Wilson second it. All those in favor?
I'm in favor.
In favor.
That is carried. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.